Welcome to iPad Pros, the show all about using your iPad to be productive and get work done. I'm Tim Chen, host of the show.
Yeah, so it composes everything into text, and what I love is because our podcast it's conversational, but it's quite fast-paced. We cover a lot, and so we have to splice together false takes, and Dscript really helps with that. Really helps with it, because not only are you seeing the audio waves, but you're seeing the words. And there are some AI things where, it will highlight the common words like, like, kind of. But it's good to manually kind of go through and go, okay, we don't need that kind of there, because we had two in the sentence already. And so, you can manipulate it a little bit and still keep it natural sounding.
Hello there, and welcome back to another episode of iPad Pros. I'm thrilled to be joined by Sigmund Judge from Mac Stories and the Magic Rays of Light podcast. In this episode, we dive into a few different things, including the Apple TV Go, his project of bringing the Apple TV as a portable device through the iPad, which is now possible thanks to some recent additions to iPadOS. And we also dive into the iPad Pro 11-inch versus the Mini. Those are both smaller iPads, and kind of how do you choose between two great small tablets? And we also chat about the iPad as a multi-cam viewer device. So lots of different avenues where Sigmund's using the iPad, and tons of things that we dive into in this episode. As a reminder, you can support this podcast over at patreon.com/iPadPros. By supporting this podcast, you'll get early access to both iPad Pros and Vision Pros. You can also support the podcast on Apple Podcasts. By subscribing there, you'll get early access as well. If you have not yet left a review yet on Apple Podcasts, that too would be greatly, greatly appreciated. With that, here's my discussion with Sigmund. Enjoy. Welcome to the podcast, Sigmund.
Thank you for having me once again, Tim.
Absolutely. We say once again, but I think you've just been on Vision Pros, and this would be your first time on iPad Pros.
Oh!
I mean, it feels like the same podcast, because it's like, same show with different focuses. Yeah.
I listen to both podcasts, and sometimes I just feel like I'm part of the conversation. Yeah.
Absolutely. There you go. Absolutely. So, the main reason I wanted to have you on for a while is the Apple TV Go, your creation that heavily involves the iPad to bring the Apple TV portable, and is part of the hardware modification kind of year we've had in the Mac Stories world, I guess. And I've done one of the projects. The MacPad has been created on my end, and I love that thing. And I've not yet torn open an Apple TV, although I'm very tempted. That's a pretty intriguing idea you have here.
Well, we can get it. Firstly, does your MacPad still work?
I mean, of course it does.
It should do.
Of course it does, for sure. Still my way of computing and inputting on Vision Pro and the iPads. It is such a bummer to travel with, though, because the damn thing, you can't turn this thing off. I've done the weird keyboard incognation of hold Command Option Shift for 7 or 8 seconds, and then hold the power button so it'll only turn on with the power button. That I can't for the life of me get this thing it's constantly wanting to turn on. So it'll be if it's in the bag, it'll be like beep 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 beep. It's like, okay, let me turn the speaker down so at least it's not yelling at me that way. But yeah, it still works great. Yeah, no water damage or anything.
Fantastic. We'll talk about how I actually am using Apple TV Go in conjunction with Vision Pro a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
But one of the main reasons that I created Apple TV Go and tried to find a way of doing it was the necessity of travel and covering tvOS whilst I was traveling, or, unfortunately, as has been quite common this year, in hospital. right?
Yeah.
And how I'd been kind of making captures and stuff in hospital before was by having a capture card plugged into a Mac and then using screens and some automation with the remote automations in Siri shortcuts to be able to navigate and do everything from outside of my network. And that works quite well, but it's long and convoluted and there's many failure points. So what I wanted to do was come up with a way of being able to power an Apple TV on the go, hence Apple TV Go. And there really wasn't a way to do it until last year, with the release of iOS 17, or more specifically iPadOS 17, with its UVC functionality, where you can bring in a capture device, which I'm sure wasn't what Apple were thinking when they introduced it. But, for playing video games, that kind of thing, fantastic. But my first thought during WWDC that year, being in California, was I need some way of being able to make Apple TV portable, because whenever I wanted to check something out, take a capture, I'd have to go back to where I was staying and then kind of look after the fact at what I'd captured and try and work out what was new and what wasn't. Because there's a thing that I think everyone suffers from, and that is like a bit of imposter syndrome. This was my first proper dub. And so I was feeling it a little bit. That didn't last very long. But I was very jealous of everyone else and their platforms and what they cover. And so I came up with this idea, which is a mix of an iPad Pro 11-inch from the latest generation, although I was prototyping before with an iPad mini, and that worked, but it just didn't lend itself to having enough space behind it to work correctly and get everything together. Because
for those that have not seen the pictures, and I'll try to include them in the website show notes stuff for this, is all the guts of the Apple TV are kind of like mounted. It's not like... It's very portable versus like, just, Apple TV Go, just having it as an external battery pack. It's kind of like, it's all there on the back, Yeah.
Yeah. So it's literally the iPad Pro mixed in with the keyboard, which I also modified. We can get into that.
And you're using Velcro rather than our lovely magnets.
That's it. So I covered the back with Velcro.
Yeah.
Because I did try magnets and it wasn't great.
When magnets aren't enough, you got to move to Velcro.
Well, I did. Yeah. So I put Velcro on the back of the Apple Vision Pro keyboard, and that worked great. But what I wanted was some kind of quick modification where, and I called it the Magic Island, where I cut an ESR cover and cut away the bottom third of the ESR cover.
Sure.
And then I mounted everything to that. And I've since bought more of those covers, and I'm doing different things, which maybe will be revealed next year at some point. But yeah, it's really cool to be able to have these different setups for podcasts, for recording for recording Apple TV captures. And the great thing is, because it's all being able to be run off of the Apple TV, and the great thing is, because it's being able to be run off of the iPad Pro's battery because of its increased power output, I was able to record some of my early tvOS captures this year during WWDC in the back of an Uber. On my way to something else, which was wild. So, yeah.
Was the Apple TV offline, or is it tethered to a cellular iPad or iPhone?
Yeah, tethered to my cellular phone.
Okay, very cool.
And it worked. It worked
now,
perfectly.
Apple TV doesn't have the personal hotspots as a thing. It's just a regular hotspot, right? It's not like they don't have a fancy UI for it.
So the hotspot functionality came the year before, in 2017, right? The year before with tvOS 17. So as long as you'd already set up a hotspot, as long as you'd already set up a hotspot on your phone, you can log into different Wi-Fi networks, that are public.
Yeah, nice.
And that's nice and easy. So, yeah, it's really easy, nice and portable. And it still works despite a couple of issues. So, the mod kit that I detail, and I detail the whole process in the article.
Because the big mod you need to do is remove AC power and replace that with USB-C power. Because otherwise, you're going to have to get this very loud battery that can do AC conversion, which you don't want to do.
Yeah. I mean, that wasn't necessarily an issue. It was more the bulkiness of, maybe an Anchor big battery. That
Yeah, because by doing this, that also means the iPad can power this, which is a huge win. Yeah.
But the mod is really simple. And I think... you're not taking apart like the new Mac Mini or a Mac Studio.
Yeah, with this, a different mod would need to be done for the Mac Mini if you want to add USB-C power for that thing, right?
and the Apple TVs are incredibly low powered.
Yeah.
And like I've long advocated that they should be like a computer to a degree, ready for developing countries.
Absolutely. When we learned that iOS was basically on Apple TV in some form factor, it's like they should make this as the desktop iOS machine, and like let's have real apps on it, hook up keyboard and trackpad to it, and you could. I mean, why not? This seems like the Mac Mini of iPads.
Even if it didn't want to run. Your kind of workstation off of an Apple TV, a way to connect to a Mac.
Screens or whatever. Put screens on this thing.
Yeah. Would be insane.
We don't... There's not a big VNC market here, and I don't think you can even hook up mice to it, right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't hook up a mouse to it. You can hook up a keyboard.
Right.
And there are third-party software ideals where you can use the trackpad on your Siri remote as a mouse.
Right.
Which works quite cool. It's quite cool, but it's fangly, But the mod is really simple. I think the hardest part was probably taking the bottom off of the Apple TV and doing it cleanly.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, it's just a case of removing a few screws, removing the power, and replacing it with this all-in-one USB-C mod kit, which is developed by a very, very clever modder and hobbyist out of San Francisco. I was surprised how easy it was. One limitation that I found was that the screws over time do loosen, and so occasionally you'll have to reopen it and tighten the screws. Anyway, I showed this off all over WWDC, including to a couple of people at Apple who were kind of blown away and thought I was insane for doing it. And
you should have just told those people, if you guys created a more portable Apple TV, I want to do this crazy stuff. They should really have a stick, If they had an Apple TV stick, this would be so much.
I am not an advocate of the stick.
You don't want a stick, okay?
I don't think we the Apple TV needs to kind of downgrade.
Okay.
I think there's a lot that it needs to be able to do to stay ahead of the pack.
Yeah, it's funny because from a price point perspective, you'll of course know it jumped up in price. It used to be a $99 and $69, I think, little Apple TV second gen thing.
But that didn't have a whole operating system.
Did not
with a thriving app store and.
You're right.
It was very limited. I would almost call it a completely different device to what we've
for
got
sure
now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's priced well. We're talking about Apple TV now,
we are, yeah,
rather than iPad. This is what tends to happen. So do you want to know what I'm actually doing with this Apple TV Go?
Yeah, so the why. A lot of people why have a mobile Apple TV? You have the Apple TV app on iPad. All the content's there. It's annoying if you try to take a screenshot, which probably is a nice benefit there.
Okay. Well, specifically, I did this for my own needs as someone that is very much a Apple TV aficionado that really focuses especially on this platform, and that's moved to Apple Vision Pro a little bit over the last year, and so I wanted a way of having a portable way of being able to do captures and also be able to compare. So if I've just got my iPad in front of my screen...
Yeah, because you do the Apple TV OS review, right? Yeah.
Exactly. I'm able to look over the two
now
different OSs.
Now we're saying this. Is there a world next year where you build a second Apple TV Go and you have a switcher, or you could have two Apple TVs up to compare side by side mobily?
There is... a world in which, and honestly, this nearly came to pass thanks to Black Magic switches and that kind of thing. But it didn't. I felt that was a little bit over the top, and I may start to get some looks from TCA
right
going into America and trying to get out.
Yeah, I had no questions about
this
my
conspicuous thing.
Right, I had my. No TSA agent asked where's the other half of my laptop, which is good. They just just waved it through or whatever.
But the other thing that I'm using the Apple TV Go for is because I'm using a switcher that basically strips out HDCP purely for educational purposes, so that I can capture the menus and see the actual functionality of third-party apps on tvOS. I found a way of being able to use a capture device, use the Apple TV plugged into a capture device, going through the iPad, and then the iPad sending its screen over to Apple Vision Pro. And when you're in a FaceTime call and you're doing Apple Vision Pro screen share, you can basically set up what would be SharePlay, but for anything running through the HDMI. So, Netflix, Plex, whatever it might be, Infuse. Every app can now be used, at least in Apple Vision Pro, that way, thanks to UVC, the iPad, and screen sharing, and all of that fun.
Yeah. Is there a Jackbox party pack for Apple TV?
Yeah, there is. In terms of, that's a good point. Yeah.
I was just thinking of what else
from a gaming
would be fun
point
there.
of view. Yeah, very much so. So the iPad has become quite a tool for me with regard to my coverage on Apple TV. And I think it is one of those things that is so easy and so plug and play to do, thanks to the great apps that are out there from, Elgato and others, that the iPad's I think it's just a few steps away from being able to be like a full production suite for, live streaming. I know there are a couple of cool apps that have tried to do that.
Yeah, Camo Studios, the one that comes to mind, they also have a Vision OS app, which is very ambitious. And it's a native app there.
Very cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I'll have to check that out. But yeah, Camo Studio was what I was putting reference to as well. And it's great. It just takes a little bit of setup to work out your different scenes. But there is a lot more that I'm able to do with the iPad now, even from a year ago. We haven't quite got to the point that we've discussed previously on Magic Rays of Light, and I was hoping this would come with the iPad Pro, where you could have multiple iPad Pros working in tandem to create like a touch-based software suite for audio or video editing, where everything was just touch.
Sure.
And you had one iPad for navigating, one for viewing. That's the dream for me. I think once we get to that point, then I may look into switching away from Mac.
Yeah, I'd even love like touchscreen support as an external monitor in iPad OS. Like enable that. I know Apple could even sell a little mobile monitor and sell along with your iPad.
Yeah, so that's what I'd like to see from iPad going forward.
What applications did you try in your quest for finding the best one as far as the capturing of the Apple TV on the iPad?
Okay, so there are so many actually really good apps out there, but the three that got me was, of course, we've already talked about Camo Studio for live streaming, although I haven't really done any yet from the iPad. But that's been quite helpful for comparing two Apple TVs connected to the one iPad and having the split-by-split view. Genki Studio, which I can't remember what it was called before Genki purchased it, but I was running the beta with iPad OS 17, and I fell in love with just how simple it was, how there were controls to take photo captures as well as video captures, and then control of bit rate and where it's saved to, whether or not you wanted a constant bit rate or variable. That kind of stuff, really, really helpful, including the ability for uncompressed TIFF images and high efficiency video capture if you wanted it. But I kind of switched between the two because I use Elgato's 4K-X capture device. And so I've been using that alongside Elgato's own capture app, which does the job. It's got some nice quick access to recordings and snapshots. You can take pictures and record. So it's really depending on what you need. I like that Genki has the quick access on really kind of deciding how much bitrate control you want. There's a slider there, which is great for bringing those video file sizes down if you're posting to socials and the website, and Mac stories as well, because we have to keep control of how big those files are that we're serving to people.
Sure. Yeah, Federico's like, okay, why did Mac Stories quadruple in size in the past 6 months? Oh, Sigmund!
So, so they're my reason. They are the different reasons that I use multiple apps, but also, everyone's improving throughout the the weeks and months, right?
Yeah.
So you want to keep an eye on what everyone's doing.
And then also mentioned is the NDI HX Capture app in your article. And NDI is a technology I investigated to try to bring like better remote play directly to Vision Pro in some way for the PS5. And those devices get very expensive, so I quickly abandoned that notion. But this is a software NDI that acts as a hardware NDI. Can you explain this one a bit more?
Yeah, so it's a capture app that basically turns your iPad Pro into an NDI encoder. I don't think, of course, you're going to have far more flexibility and far more stable process when using hardware that's specific for it, without lots of other things running in the background. But
because it's basically wireless HDMI. Is that what this technology is?
It is literally like another option in your screen. It's just using a different protocol.
Okay,
and it's far more stable. I had been using it to route through my PlayStation 5 from the iPad to my Apple Vision Pro.
Okay, so you were doing what I was
using it as well.
What I was
talking about. Yeah, it's pretty okay. It's pretty okay. I managed to have a few competitive games of EAFC on there.
Sure.
But whether or not you could with first-person shooters and whatnot, probably not.
Yeah. I've kind of given up so far on the Vision Pro for that and just use my PlayStation Portal when I'm not in front of my TV. Yeah.
Yeah.
But understand the appeal, because I would love a nice big PlayStation 5 in the Vision Pro, for sure.
Oh, absolutely. Who wouldn't? And some Saturdays I have the Vision Pro on. I've got my game playing. I've got the football just above on another screen. Yeah,
it's such a shame that they don't enable the iOS app on Vision Pro for remote play. And then also, I can't, for the life of me, get the Mac version working again. I don't know if the beta of macOS broke the remote play app on the Mac. Because I really want to test out, I know this is an iPad podcast, but I'd love to test out UltraWide mode for remote play via the Mac app on the Vision Pro. That could be interesting.
I really hope iPad comes up with some way of having an UltraWide display working in tandem with Vision Pro. I thought because Vision Pro and Vision OS is very much akin to iPad OS, that might have come to the iPad first.
You mean like a iPad virtual display type situation to bring it in there? Versus the AirPlay solution we have now, which is less than great because there's no control mechanism. Yeah. I mean, I would love that. As far as power, how long can you run this setup? Like the Apple TV is taking juice from the iPad 11-inch. What kind of battery life things? If you're at 100%, how long can you take this thing?
Really depends on what you're doing. If it's a still capture, then I know 6 hours.
Okay.
If it's video and it's high bandwidth video that's passing through, then maybe 2. It does sap the energy.
Okay. And what's the most intensive? What's the most intensive game you've tried on the Apple TV this week?
I haven't really tried capturing games.
Okay.
But what I think should be said is, attached to the iPad, we've got the and they're all being powered. The Apple TV, the Apple TV, the capture device. Then a switcher, and then a USB-C multi-port adapter hub that is passing that power through to everything. So there's a fair bit going on.
And the switcher is solely to strip out the copyright protection, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
But the nice thing is also, because there's an extra HDMI.
Oh, Nintendo Switch could hook up right up to that if you want to, too.
Well, I was going to say, the nice thing is, because you've got an extra HDMI out, you could also then pass it through to a TV.
Nice, yeah.
So you can capture at the same time, which is nice.
Oh, it's watching. Yeah, that's very nice, yeah.
And on top of it, the particular switcher that I'm using, I didn't realise this, and I guess I just was so focused on what I was trying to achieve. But it has switches on it to be able to change the video output. So, for example, if you wanted Dolby Vision, even though officially it's not seeing Dolby Vision and passing through it, it's able... Officially, it doesn't support it. You're able to pass through Dolby Vision and capture in those video formats as well. So, an upscale, downscale. There's a lot. And recently, I put that switcher. Recently, I put that capture device in the Mac Stories gift guide. So, nice. Anyone that wants to grab it, I would recommend it. One other little thing, the flap, or, the Magic Island, as I like to call it, acts as quite a good stabilization flap on the Apple Vision, on the Apple TV Go. So, yeah, there's a fair bit being thought about here, but a bit wacky.
Have you tried for longer sessions powering the iPad through the Magic Keyboard? Does that keep up with the power draw you're doing from the Apple TV Go at all?
No, it doesn't.
Yeah,
it doesn't. And honestly, I don't want to put too much more pressure on the keyboard after replacing all of its keys, and I'm trying to look after it now.
Yeah, this is like a very limited edition hot keyboard. So yeah, for those that don't know, also as far as mods. The Apple TV remote is a very classy black and silver look. It's very nice. And it's the same look you'll find on, say, a MacBook Air that I'm sitting in front of right now with my iPad here. But the iPads, as you know, they've got the silver and white look when you want the silver keyboard. And if you want black keys, you need the black aluminum, which, I hate this. Like, who wants white keys? Like, especially like, it's harder to read the actual keys themselves. Like, you get gray and white keys, and then when it's backlit, it looks it's less good. Like, we should just get rid of white keys. We don't need the white keys at all. I mean,
there's a reason why the band is called the Black Keys, not the White Keys, right?
Exactly. Yes. So, so you decided, let's buy 2 iPad keyboards, a white one and a black one, and let's swap the keys between the two. And tell me about this process of actually removing the keys and putting them on the opposing keyboard.
Lots of patience, lots of coffee.
Tweezers involved? What are you
lots
using?
Of YouTube tutorials. Actually, not tweezers. I'm just using what are they called? I guess like the guitar pick kind of things.
Okay.
But I used them from my iFixit tool pack.
Yeah, like the plunger things.
Yeah, the majority of the keys were fairly easy. The thicker keys are where it gets a little bit difficult because there are 2 elements in which are holding them.
Yeah.
And depending on the shape of the keys.
And you've got a weird looking one there in England there, that return key. It's all sort. We don't have that crazy shaped key over here.
Well. I don't know. I don't know how to comment on that. My weird shaped key.
I gotta make fun of England as much as I can, right?
True.
Yeah.
I think we do enough of that ourselves, to be honest with you. But yeah, it just took a little bit of patience. There were a few keys that were a bit iffy, and I showed my work to an Apple store and an Apple store employee who I will not name, and they were like, "Oh, they use the same keys on the new keyboard as the old one, and we might have a few spare keys. Let me take this behind in the shop and see what I can do." And he fixed the ones that had broken.
Okay, so there were some broken ones.
There were like 3 on the top row, including the lock key. I think you can kind of see it in the image. It's a little bit skew with. And the space bar. The space bar has like these little nipples underneath, right? That you got to be so precious with. And one of the nipples had broken.
Okay.
And so
and you want a good space bar. That's an important key.
I was able to get a new nipple, Tim.
That's we want to hear, With
delicate hands, we were able to replace the old nipple, with the new nipple.
What keyboard isn't great if you don't have 3 nipples on it?
Exactly.
Yeah. And I love that it's good you knew somebody, because I'm sure if you just randomly show up to an Apple store, most Apple Genius bars would be like, we can't touch this. Completely.
Thank you to that.
This is the third-party RAM of key options here, but you're using Apple first-party RAM. This is like you took the SSD from a different Mac Mini and put it in a second Mac Mini or something. Yeah, it's that situation where Apple would be like, no, you can't do that.
But I think the good thing to know is, if you're looking to copy that and replicate that with your own Magic Keyboard for iPad Pro, you're able to get replacement keys fairly easily on the second-hand market, because a lot of the older keyboards are getting thrown out as people.
So the first generation Magic Keyboard for iPad works with these.
Yeah.
He did not say if like the Mac key. These are different keys from the Mac keyboard,
right? Function row keys, of course, you can't, right? Because they didn't exist.
They did not.
But everything else is fairly replaceable.
And the Mac laptops use different keys from this, as far as you know.
Yeah,
because they look identical. They really do.
Yeah. There's slightly different switches.
Okay, it's a slightly thinner keyboard, I'd imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And then you have a fully assembled black one with white keys now?
I do not. I had a few problems. I offered it over to Stephen Hackett. I was like, hey, if you can get this back together, maybe we can raise some money for St. Jude's.
Sure.
That became a little bit complicated.
Sure.
Hopefully something can be done. Charities and the legalese can be a bit complicated on that, but
the whole gifts versus buying something
at some point. That could be fun and maybe raise some money for a charity.
Yeah, very cool. Anything else on the Apple TV Go? As far as input on the Apple TV, you of course have the Apple TV remote, and there's no way to use the iPad's keyboard as like a Bluetooth keyboard for the Apple TV, right? You've explored those options.
No, and the one thing that I really hoped for was that I'd be able to use the remote app on the iPad as an input. Yeah,
and Control Center has that thing too, right?
But when you bring in Control Center, it Gaussian blurs everything else.
Yes.
So what would be lovely is if we got the remote app back from Apple as a standalone thing, and then I would be able to do like side by side. That would be great.
Yeah,
having to take the Siri remote with me, but
now you could mount your iPhone to your iPad and have the remote app there with keyboard.
Ooh, Oh, with an app?
With Control Center open on your iPhone as a second little thing.
Oh, yeah. I've done that.
Yeah. That'd probably be the way to do it, yeah. And then you're using the highest storage capacity model, or what Apple TV did you open up for this?
I always get the best Apple TV, especially because there are differences this generation. The lower model doesn't have Ethernet, it's Wi-Fi only. I don't think it has the Fred radio, if I remember correctly.
Sure, yeah.
So, I think that Apple TV, the Wi-Fi only one, they could have got down to 99 rather than 129, I think it is. Hopefully that happens next generation.
Yeah, 99 is like the sweet point for like people that aren't enthusiasts, I think,
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Anything we didn't cover about this project that you want to be before we move on to other topics?
Honestly, I think, if you're interested anymore, check out the article. I'll be quite honest, I am not the most natural writer, right? It takes me a while to kind of get into a flow and be able to piece something like this together. And this just flowed out of me. I had so much fun putting this together, getting the pictures and the small like GIFs and stuff together for this. And yeah, I think it's interesting also in the sense of you don't need that massive power supply in the Apple TV. So it'd be interesting to see where the Apple TV form factor changes down the line. Me personally, I want it to have more room. I want it to get bigger, especially with the new Mac Mini. And I don't know if you've seen this. There's a guy on Twitter called Love to Dream, who used to be a prolific leaker. And he recently anodized a Mac Mini for Space Gray.
Oh, I have
and
seen
it looks like the Apple TV of my dreams.
It looks lovely. Yeah.
So I'd say check out the project and give it a go. If you have any issues, let me know. But I would also suggest getting a replacement mod kit just in case one of them burns out. I think that may have happened to me somewhere down the line, because after probably about 3 months, I couldn't get my Apple TV to power on. And then I replaced the mod and everything was good. So yeah, I don't know what the lasting appeal of the Apple TV Go is. And it's very, very niche. But yeah, suits me well. And again, I think there's elements here that would be really, really helpful for people. I'm never going to condone piracy of any kind. But there are people that especially live with older relatives, don't have the ability to teach their older relatives how every individual video app works. And if there's a way of getting the content that they want to watch in one app that they can learn, then that's kind of brilliant as well. So there is a accessibility situation going on here as well.
Yeah, it's such a shame. Like music, we went DRM free. It's like I think you'd have more adoption of people buying digital files if they went the route as music route, and it's clearly not stopped people from pirating video. Like it's not slowing down. Like it's a weird thing where they've really hunkered down on this whole thing. Like even the rentals, people have figured it out. Like if once things go on video on demand within hours or even before that, it's up on piracy sites for those that don't want to pay the people.
I think also as files get bigger and bigger, and this screen on the latest Apple iPad Pro, it's incredible, right? And that's kind of why I went down this route. Although I do have questions whether or not I should have gone with a Nano Texture display.
It's very nice.
I'm happy. I'm very happy at the moment, but I think I need to at least attempt trying one in the future.
In your own environment, I would say too. Apple Store is one thing, and using it at home, and as you go about your life, it's.
But Tim, even if on an iPad Pro, you could take an SSD and hook it up and be able to transfer some DRM content from the TV app on there, that would be really, really helpful.
Yep, you totally can.
Space and not having to download and that kind of stuff.
Totally, yep.
So there's definitely things that they can do from a media consumption point of view still on an iPad Pro that I'd like to see.
Yeah, like the actual files, you can't access them. They're downloaded, but they're just in settings. Do you want to delete these things? Or
And it's not really limiting piracy.
No.
Right? In terms of, people were, I believe, taking the files direct from the servers with certain software and whatnot.
Sure.
So, yeah, it seems like more of a user inconvenience, but no doubt that's going to be tied in with the licensing deals that have been.
Yeah, and it prevents a lot of people from actually buying the stuff because they don't trust it. That at a time the service could rip the file off of the service, and they don't have access to it anymore, and they don't trust it, which I don't blame them. I trust it more than I should because I've experienced where videos get ripped off the service, and I still have it in my library. Like I own, I own Heavenly Creatures on my iTunes account, and it's not available for purchase in the United States. It hasn't been for probably 5 years. It's not been available.
And it's all well and good having it in the library, but when you're searching via Siri or whatever,
I know that.
It's gonna either say it's not available or it's available on this streaming service that you have to subscribe to, or it's changed providers. You can purchase it even though you own it from a different provider. So it's a terrible experience.
Yeah, I own several copies of the same movie because I forgot I actually bought it already. It's terrible. Yeah,
I've done that.
Yeah.
So,
the iPad Mini got updated recently, and did you end up picking this thing up? You have the 11-inch. I saw a lot of minis from the kids at Thanksgiving this past week. They've got iPad Minis. It's like, oh, these are so nice and adorable, and I can't justify it though because I got the 11-inch. They're too close.
So my history with the iPad Mini, I got the last generation iPad Mini. And when I was in California for a trip to Apple, this was in, I'm going to say 2022, my bag was stolen in San Francisco in quite a horrible way. And in that bag, thankfully, wasn't my MacBook, but was my iPad Mini. So as soon as I got home, I replaced it. And for that reason, it's got a sentimental value to me. That didn't last too long because once the iPad Pro came, I traded in the iPad Mini towards it. That said, I love the form factor of the iPad Mini because the way I use my iPad Pro is always in a docked mode. I very rarely take it out. It's like become a mini personal computer. Whereas the iPad Mini, when I was using it once again like an iPad.
Isn't it nice?
And it did everything, right? I was able to edit my podcasts. I was able to... Honestly, the main thing I do on my iPad Pro is create chapter artwork for our weekly podcast, Magic Rays of Light. And we've got templates and everything ready for that. So that worked just as well on the iPad Mini, if not better, because I always had it with me. And I was tempted to pick up an iPad mini just for home theater use as a home theater controller.
Mm-hmm.
And a week that happened, we started to get rumors of home controllers and different devices possibly coming soon.
Yes,
Apple.
the HomePod.
So I just kind of so it's just kind of I'm taking it a step back at the moment.
Yes.
But yeah, I think an iPad mini as a home theater controller is perfect.
Totally. Yeah.
If not expensive.
Yeah. Quite expensive, yeah. Yeah. I use the iPad 11-inch as a tablet once again because I have the MacPad as my input and the iPad as an iPad. And it's so nice using an iPad as an iPad. For those that have left your iPads docked, so take it out of the keyboard every now and then because it's a fun experience.
Yeah, I agree. I just think the 11-inch even might be a little bit too big to use as an iPad, whereas the mini is just perfect.
It's true. The mini, it's such a nice size.
You sold me on a mini, Tim.
It's such a nice
Sigmund,
size.
stop spending money.
If they made a Nano Texture OLED mini, that would be,
that was the big thing for me, actually. I was like, okay, if there's a new iPad mini, please let it have OLED.
Yeah.
Right? And those refresh rates and everything else. If it did, I would have bought it.
Yeah.
I would have probably sold my iPad Pro 11-inch and gone back to the mini. Because despite all of the power and everything on the iPad Pro, I think the question still remains, what is all that power being used for? Yes, these chips are super fast and very, very clever.
But they've been years ahead for a long time now, as we know.
Yeah. And we're still... Is it fair for me to say... I'm kind of uneducated in terms of, iPad Pro with regard to education and that kind of stuff, right? Or real professional work. But there doesn't seem to be a lot of innovation happening based on the power of the chips.
Right. Yeah, I'd say that's fairly accurate. There are some apps that came out this year that are taking advantage of the power of iPad, but few and far between. The one that comes to mind that's, I'd say, a very power-hungry app is in the 3D. This is kind of in your wheelhouse a little bit. It's in the 3D world for movies and stuff. The one that comes to mind is ZBrush, which takes full advantage of the iPad. So ZBrush is the app they'll use at Weta Studios and stuff like that to create all these 3D assets, the CGI monsters and whatnot. And that is a full-out iPad. It's an iPad app, but it's got the foundational layers from the Mac app of ZBrush, and so there are a few apps like that that do take advantage of the iPad's power, but not many. Yeah.
I think the one thing I was thinking of was using the iPad Pro as like my central video point for maybe putting together multicam videos with Final Cut Studio and of course Blackmagic's DaVinci Resolve, and in the last year since Apple really shown that all off with the multiple iPhones and everything else, Sony cameras and Lumix cameras are now doing the same thing, where you can just hit one button and multi-record and have all of this camera control for cameras. And so that's kind of another thing where I had this plan and I've now diverted to, I want cameras with big lenses.
Are cameras more expensive than your extra iPhone you have laying around?
Yeah, they are. But I just feel like they're still a lot more viable just in terms of the image that you can get out and then manipulate afterwards.
Agreed. Yeah, for sure.
And lenses, glass makes such a big difference.
They really do.
So
the cameras all sync up through what app you mentioned just now for Sony?
DaVinci.
DaVinci. Okay, cool.
Yeah, from Blackmagic.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great app. That's Mac only for the multicam for that?
Multicam works on iPad.
Okay. Excellent. Yeah, sweet. Yeah, that's a great app. I don't do much video stuff, but when I did play around with stuff, it's like, oh, this is free? Come on, guys. What are you doing? It's like Apple's, it's $300 on the Mac for like forever, but DaVinci's like, it's free. Yeah.
One thing I would say from a iPad usability point of view, obviously podcast editing. I think you edit all of your podcasts on iPad. Yeah,
with Ferrite. I did some of that on the Vision Pro, but I've switched mostly back to iPad, and I found the Apple Pencil to just be a lovely device for that. Yeah.
I was using Ferrite when I first got an iPad Pro, right? The very first iPad Pro that I owned. And I love it, but I really, really enjoy an app called Dscript, which up until last week, I was using on my Mac because there isn't an iPad-based app for it, which I'm continuously pulling my hair out about, and I can't understand why it's taking so long. But I recently discovered for myself, and maybe this had been there for a while, that there is a web app that you can use for Descript on iPad, and this week's episode was edited directly on the iPad Pro with the Descript app.
Entirely in Descript?
With the Descript web app, sorry.
It's entirely in Descript?
Yeah, entirely in Descript.
So I've never used this app. From my knowledge, you're editing text, basically, right? And then
it composes everything into text. And what I love is because our podcast it's conversational, but it's quite fast paced. We cover a lot, right? From
a lot of different segments and stuff, and
exactly.
You can add music and stuff in the background easily with Dscript.
And so we have to splice together false takes, and Dscript really helps with that. Really helps with it, because not only are you seeing the audio waves, but you're seeing the words. And there are some AI things where, it will highlight the common words like, like, kind of.
Could you can do a search all and just remove all ums in one fell swoop, right?
And it's bad. Don't do that.
Don't do that? Okay.
But it's good to manually kind of go through and go, okay, we don't need that kind of there because we had two in the sentence already. And so, you can manipulate it a little bit and still keep it natural sounding.
Sure.
So that's why I love Dscript, and I hope Dscript bring out an app where everything can be stored and I'm not reliant on Safari not crashing.
Yeah.
So
with multiple tracks with Dscript, you see each track with the words associated and how they time up to the other track.
You place the two tracks in, you import them at the same time, and they combine them, and then you've basically got a script
in a single thing, and with no speaker indicator.
Yeah, you've got the speaker indicator, but it's laid out like it is a script.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
And so you're seeing the words, but then you've got the audio timeline at the bottom.
Okay.
And yeah, it's just brilliant. It
and
really is.
To add like the music background stuff, is Dscript able to do that, or do you need to do a different tool for that?
No. We just throw it all in.
Okay.
And we're able to change fade in, different properties.
Because you do have Wave as well as a backup. Okay, gotcha. Okay, cool.
Yeah,
very cool. So, I should play around more with that tool. I love Ferrite so much, especially since they added the 2x playback. It's probably not as fast as reading text, but it's very fast. And then any other iPad apps that you're using or loving these days?
It's been a while since I've really explored any new iPad apps.
Mm-hmm.
I think because of my fascination with Vision Pro and Apple TV. And really, it's Procreate for me.
Mm-hmm.
It's Ferrite on occasion. The other apps that we mentioned, like Elgato and Genki and NDI,
Mm-hmm.
And Camo Studio. They are my main apps that I go to pretty much every day at some point.
Yeah.
And I just love how easy touch is in regard to, okay, I've made a capture and I can just very quickly go in, change the duration, change the aspect ratio. One thing I cannot stand is posting videos that still have the black bars. I'll just change the aspect ratio on all of my videos.
Do you know anyone at Disney?
To be able to fit there?
You talk to the people at Disney. It's so obnoxious in the Vision Pro app having the black bars and all their video content.
I noticed that.
Man, it's bad. Yeah, you're watching Skeleton Crew and you got the black bars locked in there.
Oh, I just started Skeleton Crew yesterday on the projector.
Okay.
Wow.
It's good.
It's really good. I've not liked much of the Star Wars output from the last few years. This is great.
But yeah, load that sucker up on Vision Pro. You'll have the black bars. And some environments hide them better than others, but they're there. Yeah.
That's a bummer.
But they got a great app otherwise, yeah.
Yeah, I think the iPad apps for streaming have been great. I love the fact that you can just AirPlay.
Mm-hmm.
You don't even really need an Apple TV in that regard. If you're like traveling and going to see friends and that kind of thing, and you want to watch something, the iPad's kind of perfect for that, especially if it's got a good amount of storage. But yeah, that is pretty much it. I would say one app for playback, Infuse. I can't tell you
so good
how good Infuse is if you have a personal media server.
Yeah, I'm borderline. I want to do that $100 unlock, whatever, because the Vision Pro app is also incredible.
Yeah, it's so worth it, and kind of fixes an issue that we were talking about in terms of DRM'd content, because you can literally, have your shows and films stored on an SSD, plug it into your iPad Pro, and get Infuse to play it.
Oh, DRM content. Yeah. So,
I mean, yeah.
Would it do DRM content? Like if I move the DRM files from my Mac over to a SSD, would Infuse touch them?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Sorry, what I meant was we were referencing earlier about DRM'd content and how that would be good.
Yeah.
Yeah. The content I'm talking about isn't DRM'd.
Isn't DRM'd. Yes, gotcha.
So,
but no, it's great for direct integration. Plex, I use it with my Synology server. It's got the stuff that I've got there it's wonderful.
Well, Dolby Vision and everything is compatible with iPad Pro, right?
Mm-hmm.
Plex, however, there's a lot of profiles for Dolby Vision that Plex just does not work well with. And Infuse just eats it for breakfast.
Yeah.
So,
no, Infuse, great app. Yeah. I've not started on my own Plex server. It's I don't know, whatever the case. But.
We'll talk about this. I'm gonna have to get you on board. Make sure that you get a Synology NAS and.
I've got my Synology. I've got it's probably 12 terabytes in that. It's a 2-bay, but I've got some big drives in there. Yeah.
I recently got a 8-bay Synology.
Oh, that's a big boy.
I've got 18 terabytes per drive. right now.
That's a lot of storage you have access to.
It's a lot of storage for hopefully some video work.
Yeah,
coming in the new year.
Very cool.
So yeah.
Well, where can people find your excellent podcast all about Apple TV and what you're up to online?
Absolutely. Magic Rays of Light over at Mac Stories. We're about to head to episode 150 before the end of the year. So excited about that. Of course, you've been on the podcast before. We'll have to have you back very soon. But you can find me everywhere. You know, obviously the social media landscape is changing, but you can find my writing over at Mac Stories. You can also find my kind of daily posts on all sorts of different things regarding Apple, but mainly Apple TV and Apple Originals, on Threads, on X, on Blue Sky, on Mastodon. Sig Judge is where you'll find me, but I'm sure you'll link to all of those in the show notes. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
I mean, the first time here, sorry.
Yes. No, this has been great, and I've been so curious about this Apple TV Go, and such a cool little project.
Thank you.
Well, that was my episode with Sigmund. My thanks to Sigmund for time recording this episode. My thanks to you for your time and attention tuning in. Make sure to check out the Magic Rays of Light podcast. It's an excellent podcast all about the Apple TV world. And if you'd like to support this podcast, head over to patreon.com/iPadPros or subscribe in Apple Podcasts. With that, I'll talk with everyone again real soon.